So a little bit more about me. Yeah, I've been here, turned my 4 years on last Saturday, believe it or not. And I didn't even know, people brought it to me. So time flies when you're having fun. So anyway, I'm a CPA. I've got a law degree. I'm a policy wonk, and so I depend on Kim and Debbie for the program side of things, and so I would defer to them a lot. And I think you've probably seen since Brandon left that we really work as a team, a real collaborative team, and so that's kind of our intent to keep going in that same manner. So just a little background too, we have a trade group, Cascada, which is where all the state CDBG groups are members of, sort of like your RPCs and stuff. And when we went in here back in 2021, the state of Missouri was rated number 44 out of 50. So we had a lot of opportunity there. Last year we were rated number 8. So our folks have come a long way. They asked us to put somebody on their board of directors, and we've got Debbie now who's on the Cascada board, so we're well represented nationally. But part of that, I like to give a lot of credit to our folks, and our folks have done a great job, but a lot of that also is from you all and the great job that you all have done, and so we appreciate the hard work and the efforts that we've done in the last 4 years to really bring this program to the level that it's at. Now, of course, we all want to be number one, and so we're shooting for that, and we hope to take it to that level. One thing, though, I want to talk about is that we're not really planning on doing anything real disruptive in the sense that we've had this transition. We've got a good flow as far as what we want to do. We focus on our customers, who is you, and we focus on our team members, and we figure if we do that, then the middle is going to come together for us. So shouldn't expect anything real drastic at this point, with the exception of the things we don't know about, which has to do with our funding from the federal government. And if you think about, I think about January, because we came in at the first of the year, really it was kind of February, and they had cut off all of our funding and cut off all of our payments, which was a little scary at that time because we had, I think $130 million out on the street at that point. Fortunately, they've restored it, and we've got a little bit of more sanity going on than what it was back then, and we've got a number that we've been funded for 26, and we can see that for 27 they've restored our funding for that too. We don't know what that number is going to be, but it's not zero at this point, and so that's very encouraging. So we think the program's in pretty good shape. We want to continue in the direction that we've gone with it, and we're going to go forward in the same manner when it comes to our annual program. Most of you probably know we don't really have any disaster funds left. We put a lot of effort into getting those out on the street, and you guys have done a great job of giving us some really good projects to fund, and so we're pretty much down to nothing on those. We have a little bit left that we can do if we have some cost overruns that we can do, but nothing like what we had even in last year at this time. So that means we're going to be focusing on our annual unless something bad happens out in the state. And so we want to look at how that program has been. The number, there's 2 main priorities, I believe, that we're going to focus on in this next year. The first is going to be the application process. We want to take that and streamline the language, make it more readable. One of my jobs when I was with Arthur Andersen back in the day, and some of you old timers probably heard of Arthur Andersen, which is a company I was with, used to be the second largest CPA firm in the world, and then all of a sudden it went to nothing because of some little company called Enron. But at that time, my job was taking federal regulations and translating them into English so that we could present those to our clients. And so my goal in the next year is to look at our applications, our verbiage in that, and do the same thing, to translate it so that it's more readable, simpler. We're also looking at things like when we're collecting data, is it something we really need to have, or is it something that we can wait and do later whenever we're just trying to decide which projects we're going to fund. The second thing that we're going to work on is the scoring process. And so there's been a lot of uncertainty, unhappiness about how the scoring goes, and not just from you guys, but also from us that have been doing the scoring. And so we're going to try to make that process a little bit more streamlined and make it more sensible. And we're hoping to get that done. We hope we're going to put some of the scoring processes into place before we do our 25 admin, which we just closed off a couple of weeks ago. So, but you guys will let us know how that works. One big change that we're going to do, though, just for an FYI, which I just said I wasn't going to do anything disruptive, but this will be somewhat disruptive, I'll just say, is that we're not going to do the individual one-on-one sessions with the scoring after the fact for the folks that didn't get funded. It took a number of weeks to do. There was hours and hours of time. And we're just not sure that that was the best way to spend the time. And I don't know that we ended up any better after than we started. And so what we'll end up doing is once we have scored and once we figure out, what some of the issues were, then we will have a webinar that we put on for everybody to chime into. And we'll cover sort of in a checklist type of a manner what we saw that was problematic and what could have been better. And so we think covering it in a general fashion might be better than taking the time, where we spend hours and hours on this one-on-one. So the last thing that I hope that we can work on is we've got our consolidated plan that we've got to go out in, I think, 27. But we're going to start a year early on that because last time we started late, and what happened is we rushed through everything, and we had the categories we ended up with, which ends up being the categories on the action plan that we fund, and then it ends up being maybe things that we don't necessarily want to fund so much. And so what we're going to look for from you all is to help get input on those activities that we need to be funding if they're different than the ones that we currently fund, and then making sure that we get citizens out to our meetings, our citizen participation meetings, so we can get input from them and also show them what we want to do. And then maybe we will end up funding on the next consolidated plan something different that maybe more people are happy with the outcomes that we do. So those are the big things that we're looking for in the next year or so. And I know I said earlier that there wasn't going to be a lot of big changes, so I don't think that's necessarily big, but it is somewhat of a different direction. So anyway, that being said, I'm going to cover real quick some of our changes that we've had and changes that we're going to do. Okay, so with our communications, the things we put into place this year is the monthly training webinars. Those have been really fabulous. We've had great response. What we've done intentionally was finding subject matter that everybody was interested in and covered things at a deeper level, more detail than we could do in a setting like this. And we're constantly looking for new subjects. And what started it off last year was some of the comments that we got from the questions and the comments from the meeting, from this meeting last year. So we hope that we'll get the same type of conversations and that we can set up our webinars going forward. Our intent, though, is to have at least one a month, and it'll be subjects that you guys are interested in, and we're going to deep dive into those issues. The monthly program updates, we're sending out the blast so that if we have something that goes on that you need to know about right away, that you're getting information on that, and we're going to continue those. And then the office hours, those have gone well. We've had, especially around the application time, we certainly get a lot of input during those. So those will be ones that we continue. So major policy changes that went on this year, and I'm going to have to read my cheat notes here because I can't see that screen here. So, but I'll cover them one-on-one. So the first one has to do with Chapter 1, and it has to do with eligibility requirements. So what we ran into is we've had, and of course we have our entitlement communities, and our non-entitlement, which are based on populations. And in some cases, we've had folks that have reached their population limit and they're applying for funding directly from HUD to be an entitlement community. But at the same time as they're applying for that, they want to get some funding from us that, of course, we've got limited funding and we want to use it for the folks who are going to be in non-entitlement areas. And so this policy basically says that if you are applying to be an entitlement area, then you're not going to be eligible for funding from our pool because we're going to use that for folks that are just going to stay non-entitlement. So. Next one's from Chapter 3. We added additional guidance for public hearings and removed sections on that from the DR MIT hearing since the requirement's the same for all the programs. Next one is Chapter 4, Financial Management. And this one we, on a high level, what we're looking to do is formalize the extension process. One of the things that we ran into and we had not fixed for since we changed over was that the extension process was somewhat informal in the sense that emails were sent, somebody agreed to it, hopefully they recorded it, but if they didn't record it, then we'd have to go back and find the email, or in case there was a letter, we'd have to find the letter. So this is more or less formalizing it for us, and it basically says that subrecipients have to send us a request for extension on their letterhead at least 90 days before the deadline, and you have to include the reason why you want to extend, and then we're going to look at it at that time, and we've got formalized the process so it's not just going to be, yeah, let's do it, and then we've got a way of recording it and stuff. So that's the first one. The second one is that we're going to more formalize requiring pictures of the project site before and after construction. So anyway, this is a big story here. So what happens is in the last couple of years is I've gone around and I've been at several of your all's year-end dinners and stuff like that, and I've had the opportunity to interface with our legislators. And without exception, whenever I talk to them, the first thing they ask me is, what does CDBG do? What is it about? And there seems to be a real lack of understanding. And, I think since 2012, I think we put like $433 million on the street in these different projects and stuff. And so it's been significant across the state, and it's just not enough folks know about us. And so we're putting in several initiatives this year that are going to help make us more visible. And so one of the things that is part of that is this, where we're going to request that you all provide for us photo documentation before, during, and after the projects. And so we have that in our files, and we're going to use those in some of the things that we're going to do I'll talk about in a little bit. But we're going to need to start documenting photographically, your projects. And we see this when we go to Cascada, where these other states, they've got really elaborate photo collages of these projects that they're doing. And so we just want to get to that point ourselves. So that one again goes back to providing photos for us. And the policy basically says that, we're not going to pay your first RFF until we get your befores, and we're not going to pay your last RFF until we get your afters. So just takes a picture, but you get it then. So the next one in the budget is we had this past year, we did move the policy that said that we would we're going to pay the soft costs on top of your project. And so if you had a project that the construction was going to be $750, it used to be that $750 included your admin and your engineering. And then we had a lot of folks in the last year with inflation and stuff come to us and say, well, our engineering people just can't do it for the amount that cap is for, because it's based on that $750. And so what we did informally was we started saying, okay, well then we will fund your $750 in construction, and we'll put your engineering and your administration on top. And what this policy does is basically formalizes it in our policies, which of course you guys get to use too, so that we will continue to do that. And then the bottom part of that policy is the same thing about the pictures. Maybe pictures. All right, changes to 4C. This has to do with the extension we talked about earlier, the extension process, and that is that we may not grant and the word is may, not will or must, but we may not grant an extension if it has been more than 5 years since we granted the award and there's been no activity on that project. And the reason is that HUD is putting a lot of pressure on us to get the money in and get it out. And we can redeploy those funds and get another project funded and get some work actually done. And we know there's a lot of things, we see this typically in water projects where we're working with DNR and somebody else to, and trying to get their funding in place also. So there may be, this part of the policy is about that we may not grant one if you've got money and you haven't done anything to use it. So this one, 6B, this is going into risk assessment, and this has to do with the changes in the uniform guidance, where they've moved the single audit requirement from $750,000 to $1 million. We talked about this last year in the update for uniform guidance, and so we've just simply put this in our policy. The next one, I'm not going to talk about a lot because Kaylee's going to cover in detail, but this one has to do with that we're instituting a risk assessment on the RPCs and private grant administrators on a yearly basis, separate from the risk assessment of the project. And so the reason for this is that in the past in our risk assessment, what's happened is that if a project, a subrecipient, used an RPC or a private grant administrator, it automatically lowered the risk without regard to the performance level of the RPC or the grant administrator. And so what this process is going to do is basically we're going to do a separate rating for the RPC and the grant administrator from the project and then put that in the project. And what that means is that the RPCs could actually cause the risk to go higher if they're not performing. And so this is part, and I think Brandon talked about this a number of years ago, that our thought process was to get a certification for grant administration, and so we can make sure that the basics are being done really well so that we don't have any risk as far as audit risk and stuff like that. And so this is part of that, but Kaylee will go into this more in depth here in a little bit. So that's probably the most controversial thing that we're going to add this year, just by the way. So, all right. The next one is from Chapter 8, Environmental Review, and since I'm an accountant and not an engineer, I'm going to let Ryan and Hannah talk about this one, but it's basically Section 8, or Chapter 8 about fill, borrow, material. All righty then. The next one is on procurement, Chapter 9. Has to do when fewer than 3 qualified qualification proposal bids have been obtained. The subrecipient should complete a review of the procurement process, including examination of the specifications to determine if they were sufficiently clear and not unduly restrictive. Also, in order to determine that the price is fair and reasonable, the subrecipient should compare the bid price to the in-house cost estimate and the past prices paid for the same or substantially similar items. So what we're trying to address here is situations where we're putting out for bid and the conversation is that we're not getting enough bids back to make sure that the cost is reasonable. And we've seen a lot of this in the past year, and I'm not sure what caused it to kick up, but what we're trying to do is make sure that we do our due diligence on the front side. I think one of the things that drove us to this policy was that we had several awards we were closing out, and when we got them, the closeout paperwork, it looked like they only received one bid, and so they went with the one bid that they got, and there was no due diligence to say, well, this is all that they could possibly have done. So this gives us some direction, and basically you're going to make sure that you keep us in the loop, and we're going to help you determine what the right action will be so that we're all going to be protected once the grant is closed. The next piece of that has to do with grant administration and making sure that it's procured right and that we don't have any conflicts of interest. So again, with that, you're going to be working with us. Conflict of interest is a big thing with the feds, and so we've got to make sure that we are right when it comes to those issues. So. Next issue is E-Verify. Of course, we know we've got to do E-Verify, but we've received some where we have the E-Verifies, but we don't have the certification or the affidavit, or the affidavit's there, but it's not signed. And so we're making sure that we get all of those pieces in at the same time. The next one, all right. So we had a conversation about this at MACOG. Our legal department is really frowning on us providing templates for contracts on our website. And we're talking to both our legal team and also MACOG as far as how can we get to a point that we can all live with this. So the problem that we run into is that the templates are not updated. They're not, we don't have any formal process where we go through every year and make sure that everything that's supposed to be in there is in there. So, and the problem that we run into from your guys' side is that HUD imposes to us certain terms and conditions that you're supposed to have in your templates. And so this one is sort of not finalized yet. We've got to figure out, how are we going to get it where, you have templates that you can use that has the contract language that we need in it, but then from our perspective with our legal team to make sure they're comfortable with the risk that it poses for the state as far as, are we providing, because we can't provide legal advice, and trying to figure out where that line is at between providing legal advice and not is what we're trying to juggle. Okay, the last part of this, let's see if this is it. No. Okay, so the next part of this is the really new thing that we talked about, that it's going into our policy. It's also been incorporated onto our contracts. And it basically is about attribution and recognition. And going back to what I talked about earlier, where we have so many of our folks in the state that don't know what we do. And I know, I'd worked in university accounting with research accounting for 20 years. And the one thing that we always had to do was anytime that NSF or NIH put a penny into one of our awards, we had to have something on any site that mentioned that award that said this project is funded by NSF or NIH. And so what we're moving to do now is to do the same type of recognition process with CDBG. And so in your terms that you're going to be seeing on your awards going forward is going to be basically language that says that you agree to to include appropriate recognition, attribution to DED and a CDBG program in all brochures, press releases, and publications promoting and or describing activities supported with the contributions leveraged by CDBG. For example, this project has been funded in whole or in part by a grant from the Missouri Department of Economic Development Community Development Block Grant Program. And then we're not requiring that you put a special sign up on your projects, but if you have a sign up on your projects, then we would like to have our CDBG logo on that also, so that as our legislators and the public go through and see these projects happening, that they recognize that the funding is coming from us. I was watching, just this spring, I was watching TV, and they had, on the news, they had a interview with one of the folks who were working on one of our projects. It had been a $15 million project that we had funded a lot of, and they were talking about how life-changing this was going to be for their community and how important it was and the high impact. And then they said they got a grant. That was it. And so I'm like, what do you mean you got a grant? We gave you that, that's CDBG. So that's part of what's driving some of this. And it's going to be important for us, especially when we go and try to solicit keeping our funding and stuff from the feds and from our legislators. This is going to be an important change for us. So we're going to ask for your participation. I think our comms people are working on a new logo that's going to be kind of just say CDBG, so it'll be very apparent. But this will be important for us going forward. You should see this probably with the 25 competitive that we don't have on the street yet, but should be as soon as we get our grant award. So there you go. All right. Labor standards, the next one is from Chapter 11, and it updated the value of volunteer time rate from the independent sector to 3207, and clarified the construction form should be submitted to CBG within 10 days of the contract award to align with Chapter 9 procurement. Next one is Chapter 13 closeout. This changes the audit number from 750 to $1 million. And then there's another policy that talks about the change of use of property that is that was acquired or paid for in some part by CDBG. And of course, in those circumstances, it has to be prorated based on the amount that CDBG has added to the project when it comes to disposal or somebody buying it out. So, let's see here. Chapter 14 has to do with the SAVE documentation. And SAVE, of course, is a systematic alien verification for entitlements. And this has to do with just making sure that the verification has been done for non-citizens. So, and also in Chapter 14, we have incorporated the information about the property register and the fixed asset database. As a reminder, once the government is paid for some property or some equipment, then we have to track that. You have to track that until it's disposed of. And we're supposed to do an inventory every 2 years. We're in the process of putting together our tracking system. As we get that in place, we may and probably will come back to you with help to identify those items that's been purchased so that we can keep them in there, and then we'll have a mechanism to prompt you every couple of years to take a look at it and make sure that you still got it. So, all right, so that's the changes in policy that occurred this year. Now let's look at the year numbers. Let me take this out so I can look. I can't see it now. All right, so this year we had a total of 96 new awards, 71 from annual and CD, 25 from MIT and DR, a total of $75.5 million in new awards, which is fabulous. We closed 43 in annual, 13 in DR for a total of 56. Our folks, and I want to recognize Chris and Lisa. I don't know if Lisa's here. Chris is over there. This year they processed 503 RFS for $56,984,000, which is a fabulous number. We should give them a round of applause on that one, guys. In 2022, they processed just under 30 million. And so that tells you just how much the volume has increased in those few years. So great job, guys. Okay, upcoming changes, and I've already covered some of these. So the attribution program we talked about, and again, it's about anything that when you talk about or have brochures or any type of coverage on projects that we fund, we'd like to have some recognition on that. And we will, we're in the process of getting the logo fixed up, and we've got the language set out for you in your agreement. So, like last year, we're still working on meeting up with legislators and trying to get them over on our side and understand what our program's about. And we take every opportunity. That's why we like coming to a lot of your all's dinners, is because you end up having them there, and then we have an opportunity to say, oh, we just bumped into you. So. Our grants management system, I think this might be the fourth year actually this slide has been on this deal here. So, but this year we did do the process mapping. And so we do have high hopes that we're going to see this come to fruition. Once it does, then a lot of the records that takes us a long time to get, we will be able to produce quickly. We'll do a lot more work up front, but then we'll have it, and then we'll be able to do a lot more reporting, and we should get some interesting numbers out of it once it's put in place. But we have gone forward on this, and so we're pretty confident that we're going to see it in the next year or so.